Excellent. So welcome everyone to NEXTWave Network, advancing the immersive workforce. Today is our first luncheon, is our first community lunch. I'm eating egg salad sandwich, so please bring your food. Feel free to eat on camera. This is our community conversation. And Anthony Perrella is our featured guest today. But what I love about the network is that while Anthony and I are having conversations, this is a different kind of experience because we invite you to participate. And the way we would like to participate with you guys is until the conversation gets rolling, we'd like to have a secondary conversation in the chat. So as we're talking, if you have ideas or questions or thoughts, talk to each other in the chat or post them for us. Or if you have a question, and then what I'd like to do is, as you guys are having the conversation, if there's something pertinent, I'd like to invite you to the conversation. Or if I see somebody in the conversation that I believe has something to add, I might call you out. So be prepared for that. So today's conversation is about virtual cities. By the way, there's a question of the day. You're welcome to go check that out too and answer that for today. But today's topic of our community lunch is virtual cities. And and I'm going to ask you to think, what is that? What do I even mean? What do we even mean when we think about a virtual city? About 8 years ago, a number of us that are actually on the call today were part of a brain trust for Virginia's Smart Communities Initiative to build a virtual city. And I remember before I started the brain trust, 2 months before, I got to work with the UN's expert on urban planning. And I remember the frustrating 2 months we had of talking to each other because they were talking about how we get utilities to everybody in the community. How does electricity? How does traffic flow? Like, how do we deal with waste? And I was trying to find the correlation between those elements and what a virtual experience of living through your day might be like. Ultimately, the goal is to build a marketplace where people can interact during their daily living moments and entertain each other and share with each other and be remunerated for their work, make money and build things. And we're thinking of this as part of the immersive economy that's headed our way, right? Disney's changed its name in the last 5 years to an experience company because it's aware that experiences are being disconnected from brick and mortar. And that means we'll be able to scale experiences at a rate that we've never been able to do before. And by removing them from brick and mortar constraints, we create an efficiency of cost and of audience. And now the ability to even pull data back on your audience members. There's so much functionality inside of these worlds for us to explore. But what is this new economy headed our way? Who are the workers that are going to dominate it, that are going to grow from it and innovate and profit from it? And how do we help them get there faster? So Anthony, I want to introduce you to Anthony Perrella, Tony Perrella. Tony is actually, we've known each other for a very long time. He's a former student of mine from too long ago. But we've worked together over his adult professional lifetime. And I've watched him go from being a professor to being in the film industry, being a theater director and creative artist, to ultimately taking over post-production for all of the the red carpet events for the Oscars, the Emmys, the Grammys, and you run all of that now, and all the branding and programming of, putting that together. But a number of years ago, so Anthony is brilliant in his own right, and you're going to find that the community here is filled with really creative, unique minds. And that's what I want to talk to you about first, Anthony, which is when I first engaged you about the virtual city and what we were striving to build. And I'd like you to talk about, because I know your enthusiasm and excitement, launched then and continues today. Tell me what your excitement was. And I know we're talking in the abstract, and we're going to get to more specifics as to what's possible. But part of the reason for my abstract conversation is I want you imagining right now what exists in those virtual worlds, right? Maybe you've visited Meta Horizons, right? Maybe you've been in spatial. Um, and so what do you see the possibilities are? And Anthony, I'm going to open it up to you first.
Thank you, JJ. Appreciate the introduction. You're far too kind with your building up of my mental acuity. But let's just start with the big picture here. I think if anybody's either seen or read Ready Player One, you've got an idea of what a picture of a virtual city might look like, what a virtual world might look like. I would challenge you to take that picture and try to figure out what that means today with the technology that we have, with the infrastructure that we have, because that was obviously the first thing that struck my mind when this conversation started was, are we talking about the Oasis? Is that what's happening here? And my early conversations with JJ, were really guided by him to challenge me to work with a blank slate, to hear the idea and to just kind of tell him what my hopes and dreams were if I could do anything in that space. And that was a very interesting exercise, but where I really found the most fruitful meditation was when JJ put a constraint around it and started talking about 360 video. Because for me, when I think about, in my world, I work in an operational world. I work with very tangible things, and I work with timelines, and I want to know what the incremental steps are to get where I'm trying to go. I want to know what the tangible steps are, because my entire goal always is to bring a project in on time and under budget. So I often have to allow myself to put that structure around it. So when we started thinking about 360 video, something really happened for me, because those tools are readily available right now. I've seen people in Hollywood toying with them in different capacities. And when I really started trying to fit my ideas into that lens, I started coming up with some different things, some new concepts that I hadn't thought of before, that just kind of gave me, what do I want? What do I want right now that I don't have, that maybe I could have if something new was available? And I'm a big fan of racing, and I play racing video games, I do sim racing. And when I read about racing and when I watch the content, I always hear about them doing these track walks. So, they get to walk the track and really look slowly at each corner and what's going on. And I'm like, I want to do a track walk. So I put a proposal together for JJ. I said, this is an idea I have. This is something that I think could happen right now. And he said, okay, that could be an experience in the virtual city. And so when I took a tangible idea I had and he put it in the scope of the project, that's kind of where it all started to connect for me, and where my earliest inspirations about what it could be are. And ultimately, what I saw was that 360 video is an entry point to bring all immersive content to a place where we have the tools now and it can scale immediately, and it doesn't require a ton of coding and whatnot. So that was kind of like my earliest. I don't know if that was helpful. That was my earliest meditations on
Yeah,
the virtual city.
I think that's great, you know, and but the point that you bring up is that our computer scientists have now started creating sandboxes for us, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Platforms and hardware and software that can create immersive experiences without the coder involved, right?
sure.
And the significance of that is it allows every other subject matter expert, whether you're an expert on knitting, or you're an expert on rowing, or you're an expert on programming, but you want to make it an immersive learning experience, you can now make these things without understanding something like Unity, without understanding some of these much more complex, higher level access platforms that you need to be educated in order to use. We've got Aaron Collegeman on the call with us, who's the CTO of Access VR, who's building Orchestrate. And to your point of 360, Orchestrate allows you to build fully immersive experiences and deploy them to headsets and to everywhere else, right? Because right now we know that when you deploy to a headset, if it's a training program, you really should have access through two-dimensional screens as well. And that's something that I know their software does. But the power of immersion in 360 is the layering, right? It's the ability to put other information contextually, whether it's a video, whether it's audio in the background, whether it's a prompt or questions or hotspots, which then allow you to branch the story, right? So by simply layering, you create a dynamism in the experience that really hasn't been accomplishable for the last few years with somebody who's a lay person. And I am that person, right? I am not a technologist. I am not great at technology. I cannot program. I almost need help turning on a computer, right? But I understand the possibilities and the importance of story inside of these worlds, because there's the ability to personalize these experiences. So sandboxes is one of the areas that we are looking to illuminate and share, so that people know what's out there today that they can begin building with. So Aaron, since we've sort of brought up a topic around sandboxes and around 360 as an entry point into an immersive market. And the reason why we need an entry into immersive market is because it shouldn't be about us going to a place other people have built for us. It should be about us going to a place that we can contribute to the building of, that we can contribute to the community of. So any thoughts that you might want to add based on what you've heard, Aaron?
Well, I mean, I suppose I have a slightly different view on these spaces. And I say that, like, I have also seen Ready Player One and really enjoyed that, right? Really enjoyed that film and that idea about these spaces. And um I suppose the oldest inspiration that lives in my head for these virtual spaces is a book called Snow Crash by Neil Stevenson, which is that's the book that actually coined the term metaverse. And it's rather dystopian. The setting of Ready Player One is sort of dystopian too. But it manages to play out this much more heroic sort of journey And I think what's interesting about both of those and what makes the world that we live in right now very different from those stories is that both of those stories sort of live in context where the adoption of these things is already, at the peak of the curve, right? Tim House, who's on the call, is very good at always reminding us about the adoption curve and the effect that that can have on the technology and the availability and accessibility of it and the usefulness of it. And so, like, when I imagine virtual worlds, and I think you guys do this too, right? We imagine these places that are just densely populated by people and diverse people, and that they want different things. And I think the reality that we face right now is one where, the adoption curve is about as low in the valley as it is going to get on the way up the other side, right? Like when we started building our sandboxes at Access VR, we were doing it at that first much lower peak of the adoption curve, right? Meta had really captured market attention with the Quest. They've got a commoditized product. People are buying them. There's millions of them out there, and there are millions of them out there still today. But I tell you what, every time I've gotten on Horizon Worlds, you know who's there? Children. There are children in there who are at home playing on mommy and daddy's headsets. And they're children because they sound like children and they say the kinds of things that children say. And children don't play the way adults play, right? Children, by and large, they make up the story as they go. And adults kind of want there to be some story to join on to. We lose a little bit of that creative wonder instinct as we age. And so you throw an adult in with a bunch of children, one that's not, initiated in the art of play. And it feels like a disaster. It's like, why am I here? There's nothing for me to latch on here. So I've always sort of like quickly wandered away from it. So I guess, I think you teed me up to talk about technology and I'm just talking about experience. But I really do think that, to what you were saying, there's a very big need yet for us to be able to define what it is and how it feels as we're getting into it, because that creates a space for us to adopt things. Whereas it's not like there's nothing on the shelf right now for most of us to pull down off and feel comfortable in. I feel like if there was, we might be having this meeting in a virtual space instead of a traditional 2D video one, right? Like, I think as a team, we're sort of like 6 years or plus running here, and we're yet to find a way to do that and have an embodied shared experience versus this version of it. And so I think there's still a lot of time yet where the not the sky's the limit. I guess the landscape is sort of infinite, and everybody can find ideas for a place in that space. And that's where in my own thinking and imagining of what this can be, I'm still sort of stuck there, right? Like, it's like, which one of these am I trying to give birth to? Is it the one where it's all carved up like a neat city and there's a grid and anybody can just come in and build the thing that they want and they pick their spot? Or is it like a completely open skybox to everybody who joins it and they just get to make whatever the heck they want? And I think as a technologist, that's a very difficult position to be in, because I just don't know. I don't know what the next thing on the adoption curve is.
You're kind of bringing up the difference between like a Minecraft versus like a Second Life.
Yeah.
Right? Like, because Second Life, there is a grid, you have to buy real estate, there's a finite amount. Whereas each player that joins in a Roblox or something like that, can start with an open space. So yeah, there are different ways to manipulate that. And to your point, Aaron, what I was kind of getting at with the 360 video was that to me made sense as a point of adoption and a point of entry right now, right? And where I saw like the real adoption curve finding its momentum is, basically training, all kinds of training. But I think about what I used to think about with 360 video is how many times in my life I've sat in a dark room or a back room or whatever and watched a training video on a computer because I had to complete something, I had to check a box, yada, yada, and it's like waiting for it to be over. And if that was in a headset, the engagement ramps up by hundreds of percent, right? The the presence and what's the word I'm looking for? The impact that the material is going to have is going to like last longer in my brain, and
Yep.
I could see that there was a market that basically any industry that was showing a video in a back room, which is all of them, right? And whether you're a waiter or a retail worker or a construction worker, or you're starting your new corporate job and you got to do, the onboarding, all of those things could be updated in a way that you could do them in a headset. They would have higher impact. And what it would do is now you've got this huge population that's doing that at work because they have to. And they're going home and going, hey, I just did this at work. Maybe I should get a headset. And now I see that like adoption curve really gaining momentum. That's kind of like in my mind where I could make sense of that trajectory. So I don't know.
One of the places that I have grown significantly since the NEXTWave Network has launched, and I was heading there already, I realize now, but it's really become about extended reality. And when I look at the world, I stop thinking either AR, which is bringing it into my life, or VR, which is taking me into that world. And I start seeing them all seamlessly exchange between each other as I walk through the world, right? And they're in pieces and parts, but I mean, I could literally shift the story that I'm living through as I'm walking. I could go from I'm walking, focusing on my family and the things I'm going to be doing for the weekend, or I could be living the experience as a spy, walking around the world, and there might be cues and clues and things that I could find. So the story can overlay the world, right? Just as my purpose. But I think these things are distributed. I think it's going to be a seamless thing that moves in and out of our lives. And I've seen the conversations on the NEXTWave Network really move us in that direction. Our purpose, one of our big goals is to get people creating content, because it's the content that is necessary to make these, putting on the hardware, utilizing these things, even necessary. So, getting people out there creating. And for me, the creators are the first community of this virtual city, the first people, the primary people that we need to service. Um, and so NEXTWave Network is set up here to specifically do that and to figure that out. But if creators are our primary first residents of our virtual cities, what does that mean to you all? Or Anthony, if I could start with you, what does that mean to you that the city needs to fulfill? What are some of its goals, requirements? And does it need to look like a virtual city? Or is it room? I'm not sure getting dumped into a large VR space with 100 other people is is actually useful at the end of the day. Anyway, Anthony?
Well, I think that goes back to the question you asked at the beginning. What do we mean virtual city? You know, and I think it's already kind of shown itself in the metaverses that already exist, right? Um, Roblox is one, Fortnite is one. You've got these mini metaverses that exist, and it's not about traveling in real time or fast traveling via map to places. It's about menus, right? I navigate menus just like I do with everything else in my life. I navigate a menu, I find what the information I'm looking for, I select it, and that takes me to where I want to go. So like that seems to be the preferable interaction at this point. I haven't seen anybody innovate that yet in a way that's excited me. Maybe Aaron, you have, or Tim. I don't know if you've seen a new version of that's usable. But yeah,
I haven't, and I don't want to steal up mic time just to say that I haven't seen something like that. I've got some thoughts about it, but I'd like to hear from Tim. Tim looks like he's got some thoughts he wants to throw on the table.
If Tony,
Tim Dog, go.
yeah,
Go, brother.
it goes through a few things that it said. So one thing for me is, to your point that you were kind of making, JJ, is like, is it a virtual room that you go into and this and that? And we want to focus on creators. And I think you remember one of my early mantras was, to your point of extended reality, don't recreate reality, right? And so I think a lot of these spaces, we don't have creators, we have recreators. They're basically just making a digital version of the real world, right? And whenever I think virtual city, I think it's extending the world of things that aren't there and can only exist digitally. So yeah, AR is a big part of that, right? How do I bring things into my environment that can only be experienced by something that's expanding or extending that reality? And yeah, if you think of a menu system, it's how we've always done things, right? And so that menu, when you go to order food, it's a list of things you pick from your list. That just got adopted into on the computer, then it got adopted into games. And if we just keep going that way, we're just kind of recreating what we know. And so for me, I'm really excited when these two worlds merge, where my reality is enhanced or extended by the technology. And to kind of pull this full circle, but also at the beginning, as you were saying, all these examples like Ready Player One and Snow Crash and everything, there's always this dystopian world, and then the virtual is a utopian escape, right? But I've never seen them as separate. I don't understand why this advanced technology comes in and the world falls apart. I feel like they're supposed to be riding together. And as this technology starts giving us more effective, efficient, and let's say exciting ways to do things, I would hope that the environment we're in, the physical one, would also, improve alongside that. So I am trying to bring this full circle, but I do see, I don't see why there has to be a dystopian versus utopian. I've never seen a virtual city or a virtual world as an escape from this reality, but an expansion or an extension or an addition to. At the moment, I think independent of AR, we can explore those worlds and those spaces and those interactions. And I think that's where we are on the curve, is that the technology gives us the ability to engage in a new way because we don't have the physical boundaries of our existing environment, right? We can float in space, we can breathe underwater, we can do things that we couldn't do. So we can change our setting, which changes our story. But I think there's a time as we move forward where those learnings then get brought back into the real world. And the technology has advanced to a place where it allows us to take those learnings and those lessons and be more in marry those technologies together in a way to our benefit. I'm sorry, I don't know how to be more specific than that.
So I think I like where you're going, because I see the ability to retheme the physical world quickly, right?
Mhm.
Like as much as we can get into VR and we can retheme, the worlds, the settings, I think because of projections and LED screens and all of the technology that's going to start hanging, or in our glasses, all the AR stuff. I mean, if we're walking by an advertisement screen, that advertisement screen is going to be playing what it wants us to see. I'm going to see something different from you, Tim, right? So these technologies actually allow us to retheme the physical world as well. So maybe as we're thinking of virtual cities, it's not a location. Maybe it's not a location which the Horizons and those places are creating. Maybe it's community, different
I think
communities
it's a
with different
dimension of
interests that get different themes, right? Different themes and however they want to operate inside the world. And then how does that become its own market, right? We've seen that happening as some of these platforms are adding their own coins, right? Well, I mean, look at Call of Duty, right? You have to buy that coin in order to purchase those weapons or uniforms or whatever, right? So we're seeing little economies being born. Anthony, it seemed like you had, Aaron?
Go ahead, Aaron.
You sure?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that, so not to digress too much, I had a really great conversation with a friend of mine who I've mentioned to you guys before. He's a local, now retired lawyer, does a lot of D&D role play on the side. And actually, JJ, one of the things he's doing now is consulting and trial preparation. And so I was picking his brain about Story Engine, which is a completely other topic of conversation for another day. But he did this really cool thing for me where he was like, there's like three things that you have to have in order to have story engaged. And I'll do a really bad job of this right now, but it was kind of like, you need protagonists, you need antagonists, and you need some sort of goal, right? And and then he did this. Then later in the conversation, he did the same thing about how we understand other people, other minds, right? And again, it was like three things. There's like three aspects of the human mind that you need. And then he did this, he went another layer deeper, and he was like, in the meta-analysis of this, human minds need three things in order to triangulate and create something, right? If you have three aspects of something, then you can triangulate something. And I think part of what has maybe stymied us or slowed us down in the creative process here is that every time we try to talk about what a virtual city can be, there's 10,000 data points, right? And that you can't, I mean, I'm only one type of creator. I'm an engineer creator, and I like data points, right? But if you give me 10,000 data points, it's going to take me 10,000 years to create the thing, to a point that Tony was making earlier about getting things done, right? Like if you pick like three ways that an experience is differentiated from every other to become a virtual city, what are those three things, right? And I just to riff on that and then give the mic back up, like, I think you have to have spatial organization to have a virtual city. There was something that Tony was saying, or maybe Tim was saying, you guys were both talking about it. Like, getting into Second Life was always felt stupid to me because you were flying, right? Like, you don't fly in cities. You walk in cities or you ride mass transportation, because and what makes a city is there's distance between point A and point B, and all of the interesting things that happen in a city happen at point A, point B, and in between them. So if you can just go from point A to point B, you're passing up an enormous opportunity for creativity and place and stuff and random things. And look at those pigeons over there, right? Like it's just there's a whole wealth of story that exists. So spatially organized is one of those things that I think you have to have. I think you have to have other people, right? Cities are defined by density, right? If you're going into a virtual experience, that is a bunch of buildings and trees and park benches and cars, but there are no other people there, then it's not a city. It's just a facsimile of something, right? And I think you have to have other people be there, but they have to be there and participating in the story, or they're just creating noise, right? It's like the kids problem,
Yeah,
right? And
yeah.
then I think there's a third thing, right? And the third thing is you have to have something to do, right? Like you can't just be there to be there, unless maybe you're going to take a walk together from point A to point B, which is fine, right? Like that's something to do. Hey, let's walk down the street today and see what we see. But I always think of this playing chess in the park experience that I would love to be able to have, like, and then I could be like, hey Tim, join me at this URL, and you can see what I can see, or I can see what you can see, which gives us a shared sense of embodiment. And we're going to be on opposite sides of a chessboard and play a chess game. Right. And I think that would have, if you forced us to walk to the chessboard, then it would have all three of those components. Right. So I think that's it. To be a virtual city, you need defined spaces, and you need people, and you need things to do, a thing to do together. And if you get those three things together, then you have a virtual city, where otherwise you have something else. It doesn't matter what it looks like. Aesthetically, it could look like Tim's virtual city that's behind him right now, or it could look like a cartoon version of Old Town Winchester. It wouldn't matter if you had those three things. But I can be kind of heavy-handed with these. So I hope I created some place
No,
for
no.
other people to
I
latch
really
on and
like
discuss it. But
what you're saying, and I'm interested in Anthony's thought. What's interesting is when Anthony was a student at UCF, I was running a lab at UCF on interactive performance, and basically it takes an individual and it places them as a protagonist in the center of the story in a simulation stage, surrounded by like 16 performers that come in and out of their world and interact with them. Think of it as a low value holodeck, or best, like your entry level holodeck, with without real significant technology. And what you find is that for somebody to understand how to play, first they need to know who they are, right? And if they're walking in as themselves, that's fine, right? They need to know where they are, right? And to your point, we need to establish a place, a location. That could be a bat cave, right? Where you're controlling and you move in and out of your headquarters, right? And then the last thing they need is they have to be doing something. They have to be activated, right? Which is why we saw when VR was 6-7 years ago, where you could go on the moon or you can go under the ocean, and it was beautiful, right? Really interesting in full 360. But after 15-30 seconds, you're like, okay, what do I do, right? So activation. I do think that there's some new ways of relating to each other. I would like to pop into a world and make sure there are no other children in that world, right? Because one, I don't even find that appropriate.
no, not at all.
So I think that there's some work to do. But if I could say I want to hang out with anybody who's a scientist, right? Or I want to focus my community on 40 and 50-year-old graduate people, whatever, right? Can I choose my community? Can I limit my own community? Anthony, you were going to say something earlier.
Well, I mean, I was going back to a previous question of what do I think about creators being the first residents, and I thought that Aaron touched on some of that as well. I think you have a chicken and egg problem with that situation because, in order to get people to populate the thing, you need things to do. But in order for people to be inspired to create things to do, they need an audience to create for. right? So you've got like kind of like a weird situation there that's a catch-22. People who make music, I mean, they make it because, they're passionate about music or whatever, but they're also like in search of their audience. There's people to consume it, there's people to validate it. And yeah,
So,
that's where I find myself sitting with that particular situation.
the original idea was called VOTU, or Virtual Online Training Universe. And our hope was, if we created access to sandboxes for immersive training, which is where we really thought first adoption is going to happen, right? That if we created a virtual city that they passed through for 30 seconds before they got to all of their training, right? They would start to pick up other interests. And so our thought was that if we built, in the way that a river would take merchants by the town in old times, we needed to build a river of potential clients. And if those people had to go in for training, right, in this virtual online training universe, and passing through it, they could get to entertainment, they could hang out, they could listen to music that's being done locally, right, virtual locally. So we were hoping to create traffic that way, but to your point, there has to be a flow of community for a marketplace.
So it's always, this is the problem with two-sided marketplaces. It's very hard, and I don't have any answers, right? I like the idea that JJ talks about you basically put the thing that people are there for at some distance from their entry point, thus they have to sort of traverse the rest of it. And I get that. The only counter to that, which I know is not the collaborative way to discuss a thing, like what I find in trying to get more people to adopt VR for training is that it's sort of this endless quest to find the least amount of friction possible, right? And it's difficult for me to imagine this traversal thing as anything other than a source of friction for somebody who's just there to get a piece of training, right? One of the big arguments that we've heard along the way, JJ, and I think you were there for this too, was somebody reaching into their pocket with their phone and going, all the video training I ever need is here. Why do I need a headset? Like, what is the benefit? And as early adopters of the technology, we'll say all of these things like, well, it feels more like you're there. And so your brain is more engaged and your retention is going to be higher and all these things. But I don't think those things alone get people over that friction. The thing that you said earlier, JJ, that I really continue to believe in is that we need more stuff. We just freaking need more stuff. If there's 1,000 ideas out there about what a virtual city should be, how do we get 300 of them to be real, right? And then get people actually put it out there in front of people. So I think as the technologist in the room, for me, the thing that's still underutilized is WebXR. I'm working really hard to get back to WebXR because it's not without complication. None of these things are without complication, right? Unity's hard. Learning a program JavaScript is hard. Like, there's a curve, but those technologies are so much more accessible, I think, and less costly. Like, everything, I got my start doing tech because by choosing open source technologies, because those were the ones that were free. If a Unity license is table stakes to participate in the creative space of what is a virtual city, I think that's too high of a cost. And so when I think about the next couple of sandbox things are that I want to create, they're web-based ones. And the web-based technology works everywhere, and it works on my phone, it works on my tablet, it works on my VR headset, it works in Apple Vision Pro. The word on the street from the Snapchat Spectacles people is that they're going to have support for WebXR. So it just seems like that is the landscape where we should be trying to create some of these things. And so for my own contribution to this is like, I want to create that Old Town Winchester, 2 blocks of Old Town Winchester that you can get to from any device. And you can either walk in on the south end or walk in on the north end. And in the center, you have the town square, and you can sit there and play chess. And I don't know like what else will be in that, but that's the thing that anytime I let my mind drift to this particular set of problems, the virtual city problems, that's the experience I imagine. So I should probably create it, right? And maybe everybody hates it, or maybe it's great and there's like 100 people who like it. And that's really, that we'll learn so much from that, you know? Yeah, Tim.
Tim?
Simple. A comment. What's interesting also when I hear the question, what would a virtual city be? Everybody talks about what they do, and the point that Aaron was making with 3 factors and having something to do. Maybe it's more important to phrase the question of what could you do in a virtual city that you can't do in a normal city, and because I think that action is what drives the environment that's created around it, or the tools that are created, to execute that. So just like Aaron said, I mean, we're in a virtual room right now. All of us are staring at a monitor, but we're in a virtual space collectively together right now using this technology. It's not as dynamic or overpowering, but we're already doing that. We're not in the same room, but it feels like we're in the same space. So what does virtual do with this extended reality that takes us somewhere else? What can we do that I couldn't do? And like right now, I couldn't play a game of chess with Aaron in that location, but I could play a game of chess with him right now. So we could do it online, but we couldn't do it in that location. So what virtual reality could do for me is create the space and provide me the activity to do that. So when I start with the doing, it seems to go from the inside out instead of talking from the outside in. And that's, I don't know, if you find that valuable, I think that helps, because I think we're already kind of in a virtual city in many ways. We don't see it. And now we're talking about manifesting those things around us and going a little bit further so they're more evident and more, to your point, JJ, part of your story that day. Right? The little things that change the way you look at your environment, or actually are like an additional dimension or a layer to your environment. And even like you said, one other point, JJ, that falls into this is you were saying, hey, maybe I don't want to be in a space with kids, or I don't want to be in a space here. Well, as we were discussing the virtual city before, one of the neat things was not menus necessarily, Tony, but filters, right? Of saying, hey, I want to engage these types of people in this space. Well, that virtual space, whether it's augmented or virtual altogether, right? That extended space could have every demographic and every age group and everything there simultaneously, but you're only exposed to those that you selected, right? So I don't see all the kids there in their group. I don't see it here. So for me, virtual allows for this dimensionality and this layering that allows you kind of filter and thin through to do the things you want to do. And kind of, it's almost like it's removing things instead of just adding things. It seems like it gives us a filtration that we wouldn't have otherwise, as well as an additional capability. So I don't know if that came together there at the end, but I think that's a good way to pose the question.
I like the idea, or what you triggered in me is the thought that that when we're in downtown Winchester in Aaron's virtual couple of blocks, and I look at the Frisbee place beside Union Jacks, right? And can I walk in there and interact? Well, what interaction would I have in life What are my purposes in the city? What are the things that I need to do? And are there better ways of doing them than what I'm capable of doing physically in the world? Right?
You could buy me a beer. You could see that I'm in the building while you're playing chess with him, and you can go, "Oh, get a beer for him on me."
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Because I know. Look, I like the case that Tim has made before, so I'm not trying to contradict that at all. Like, I think that as a means of marketing these things, it would be easy. It would be better to say you can do something here that you cannot do in the real world. That's the magic of VR, is it can be anything. But I think that skips over a great 80% use case, which is the one you guys were just talking about, which is the thing that you cannot do from where you are right now, JJ, is sit in a room with Tim and have a beer. You cannot do that, period. You could sit on this chat and feel like you're talking to each other and have great resolution of each other's faces, and that's a certain percentage of it. But when you get in these VR spaces and Tim is embodied and you are embodied, it is different. It's not the same thing as sitting and looking at a 2D screen. And I don't think enough people have had that experience yet. But I do think that that's what's different about it. It's the embodiment. And I'll say too that I think that you guys have heard me say often about the differences between digital twins and the sorts of things that we talk about, right?
Yeah.
I do think that a vehicle for the success of this movement that we're trying to make is the idea that every city has a virtual digital twin in this platform. That there's because I would love for Tim to be able to take me to the places in his village that he thinks are great, right? I would love to take people to spots in Winchester that I think are great, and be able to do that without making them travel to the place necessarily, right? And then if those businesses that are resident in the real world can benefit monetarily from participating in exactly the case that Tim was making, buy me the beer, right? We're virtually here together. Tim's sitting in the bar with his glasses on. JJ's at home. JJ puts the virtual token in and the bartender brings a beer to Tim. That's a virtual city that works, right? That's creating commerce where none existed before, or at least commercial opportunities. So that's what hangs in my mind, right? And it might be the most boring thing for kids ever, which I'm good with that too.
It's not a playground for kids, though. It's a place for commerce, which is where we started, right? A marketplace, right? So people who have money to spend. So yeah, maybe at some point the kids have their V-Bucks, but you bring up a great point, which is something that we've come to in previous conversations about this, that the virtual city is not necessarily a separate virtual space. It's not a place that you escape to. It's a connection between the virtual and the physical worlds, right? It's those two coming together, not being separated. You're not leaving the physical world for the virtual world. You are interacting with them simultaneously. So I think that's one of the biggest revelations for me in the more recent conversations about all of this, and the various unlimited applications when you start to put that into context, like you just did.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And I thank you for giving me any credit for that. I'm just hearing what you guys are saying and trying to pull it together, because always and ever, in order to build anything, I have to make it coherent, right? So like you guys are coming up with the ideas. I think though that the direction that the technology is taking us, ever smaller, ever more acceptable to wear in public, is what's going to make some of this stuff possible, right? The glasses that you can sit with on your head and have a conversation with somebody who's actually not with you across the table, right? Like that's coming. It's coming really fast, right? And it's time to mature some of these ideas and start to prototype them, because it's going to be here. It's going to be here, and the gatekeepers are going to try to own it all, right? The metas of the world, and it's
I
going to be
just
here.
want to make one point, kind of pull it all the way back around to those inspirational ideas, those Ready Player Ones and everything else, this dystopian world. The only way that actually happens is if everybody is in a headset in their room alone and no one's going out in the actual world and engaging, right? So I feel we're at the beginning of the curve. The technological the need for creators is to give them, to your point, Tony, how do bands work? Oh, someone grabs a guitar, someone grabs some drums, someone grabs a bass, and they get together and they figure out how to play the thing and make their own music. So we need to get tools into the hands of creators so they can start building things, start creating environments that are separate from the world, so we can compare the two, so we can merge them together, and everything moves collectively up. But we have to go through this climb first of being isolated before we can bring everyone together. But to that point, Aaron, I mean, until we have glasses that allow us to change our environment or our story, or until cities are built with LEDs into the wall, on the foundational structures of the buildings and everything that enhance, we've got to understand these two worlds before we can bring them together.
Well, let me say thank you, guys. Go ahead, Anthony. Do you have any
all
final
I was going to
thoughts?
say was, it was actually a full circle moment, because I said about the catch-22 of needing an audience if you're a creator, but that's exactly what you've done here, JJ, was try to create an audience for the early creators of themselves so that they could network together and inspire each other and push this medium further in order for there to be a bigger audience outside of this network. So cheers to you on doing that.
Thank you, brother. And thank you
Yeah.
all for joining us today. Our first community lunch. And it was a community conversation, man. And Anthony, thank you for joining from Fort Lauderdale. Is that where you're at right now?
Fort Lauderdale.
Yes. Say hi to
Totally.
Florida for me. Joanne, thanks for joining us. And Aaron and Tim and Caius. And hopefully we'll see you all next week. By the way, thank you all for continuing to contribute to the NEXTWave Network. It's been really fulfilling for me. So as a selfishly, I have to say I've really enjoyed the community. So thank you all. Have a great day.